Welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast, your go-to source for everything happening in the town of Bedford's local government. Whether it's new initiatives or important decisions shaping our town's future, you'll hear it right here. This podcast is dedicated to keeping our residents informed and engaged.
Good Wednesday morning, everybody. It is July 24th, 2024. My name is Bart Warner. I am the town manager of Bedford, otherwise known as the world's best little town, and pleased to welcome you to this episode of the Best Little Town podcast, brought to you by our partners with Media Squatch here in their lovely studio located on Grove Street. Last night, Town Council had their regular meeting. Of course, they meet twice a month on the second and fourth Tuesdays each month at 7 o'clock p.m. in the council chambers of the municipal building located at 215 East Main Street. And I'll get right into what they covered and the actions and discussions that were had last night, actions that were taken and discussions that took place last night from your elected leaders. I opened the meeting by providing my usual report to council, and that consisted of an update on the Bedford Middle School project. As most people are aware, the former Bedford Middle School, located right in the middle of town on a prominent hilltop site, is being renovated by Dave McCormick, who is a contractor, a builder, and a historic preservation guru out of Petersburg. He is in the process of converting the former brick building, which was the main classroom building, into market rate apartments, and the yellowish building, affectionately known to us as Old Yellow, next door into a boutique hotel. I spoke with Dave Tuesday morning about the progress. There is quite a bit of visible activity on the site. Dave advised that they are currently installing sheetrock. He is also picking out paint colors and advised me that he has ordered cabinets for the new use of the buildings. He reports that he feels he is well on track to meet the identified deadlines for both the apartments and the boutique hotel. My recollection is that he is committed to have the apartments ready by January 1st, 2025, and I believe the target date for the hotel to go live is April 1st, 2025. The other part of my report last night was to ask council to add an item of new business related to the annual street paving list. We then moved forward into appearances before council. That is a portion of the agenda in which anyone can sign up to speak to council about, well, pretty much anything that's of concern to them and for the benefit of the community. Last night, we were joined by Joe Whiting, who is the pastor of Chamblissburg Baptist Church. He was there to note that his congregation gave thanks for our local leaders, that, a lot of folks are concerned with national level politics, but they recognize there are certainly other folks at different levels that do different things, and he read scripture and offered prayer on behalf of town council, which was much appreciated. Moving into council comments from last night, Councilman Darrell Updike thanked everyone for being physically present. Again, they do recognize that our meetings might not be physically convenient for everybody, so they certainly appreciate it when folks do turn out in person for the meetings. On that note, we do thank our partners with Media Squatch for broadcasting those on a live stream and also offering them on a YouTube venue as well. So if you can't make it personally, feel free to tune in. Councilman Bob Carson thanked Reverend Whiting for his prayer. He also noted the presence of John Barnhart, a reporter with the Bedford Bulletin. For those of you who may not have known, John had a major health issue. Actually, he had a stroke not too long ago and has been cleared and is back to work and looked good. I would say he's fully recovered. And I think we all joined Bob Carson in stating that we were just glad to see John back in the room with us and back in the saddle again. Councilman Stacey Haley echoed the comments offered by the previous council members. Councilman C.G. Stanley advised us of a very sad and very, very personal bit of information concerning Tom Paget. Tom was a former council member who served approximately 10 years ago in that time frame. Tom's a Bedford native, and CG noted that he and Tom were very close friends. For those of you that weren't aware, Tom suffered an injury at home. Apparently, he slipped and hit his head, and that led to a serious health issue. He, as of last night, was on life support in the hospital in Lynchburg, is my understanding. They were set to disconnect those systems today. So CG mentioned that, and we appreciate him sharing that information, and certainly asked for everyone to keep the Paget family in their thoughts and prayers. Councilman Bruce Johansson commented on the mural in Centertown that is being sponsored and promoted by the Bedford Get Together group. The actual artwork itself is nearly complete, and Bedford Get Together is planning to schedule a dedication event on Sunday, August the 18th. The mural itself is designed to represent people from Bedford who have served in the armed forces, beginning historically with the Battle of Point Pleasant in, I want to say, 1775, through current times and our current service folks and the folks who've served in conflicts in Afghanistan. Bruce also noted that he attended the Central Virginia Planning District Commission meeting. He is the council delegate to that group. They had a focus on traffic safety and received information from a consultant there who is putting together studies and reports and collecting data for all localities within the region for possible transportation grant application projects. They also discussed child care and workforce issues, and the planning district intends to implement a facility to train child care workers and also to serve as a resource for that for working folks who need to have daytime supervision of their children so they can get to work. Mayor Tim Black noted a previous request from a previous agenda for a tax exemption. Council has conferred with Mike Lockaby, one of the town attorneys, about scheduling the public hearing for that request. That is likely to take place at the second meeting in August, which will be August 27th. Tim also talked about a possible work session to discuss items that were covered by the Property, Streets, and Public Safety Committee in a meeting that they held on the previous evening to talk about mainly maintenance issues and facilities and probably things that could be addressed in the budget as well. The next item on the agenda was a report of council committees. Councilman Stacey Haley, who is the chair of the Public Safety Committee, covered what they discussed the previous evening, which was the need to address the location of handicap parking spaces and loading zones in the Centertown area. Also, they had quite a bit of discussion about speeds and traffic behavior on Longwood Avenue in a stretch that is wider than the rest of that corridor in particular, and there is discussion of changing the geometry of that to reduce that 4-lane portion to something else that hopefully would promote better vehicular activity in a treasured and appreciated residential neighborhood. Darrell Updike, who chairs the Streets Committee, noted that his committee met jointly with Public Safety, so a lot of what he covered was similar to what Stacey Haley did, and he noted that the main focus is to make sure that things are appropriately accessible downtown and efficient for all our citizens, businesses, and visitors. Bob Carson, who is the chair of the Property Committee, noted that they had a lengthy discussion of park maintenance in all our facilities and programming. Council is looking to develop a bit of a punch list in conjunction with our Public Works Director, Tom Woodard. But we're also going to probably ask the community to help if they're interested. And we hope to have a list of items published in the next few months that we will take on, but we will also make available publicly to any groups or individuals who might be interested in helping us spruce things up. The other item of interest from the property committee was a recommendation to change the name of Edmund Street Park. That is a park adjacent to Susie Gibson Science and Technology Center that the town recently acquired through a very cooperative and productive negotiation with the school board in Bedford County. The property committee recommended changing the name to honor Ms. Beulah Payne, who was a great contributor to the Bedford community in general, and just a person that was recognized as a solid supporter and kind of a go-to person who just really looked out for people. And the most recent example of that was during the pandemic days when she would, on her own, kind of be a one-person phone tree to check on folks in the neighborhood and make sure they had what they need. Miss Payne passed away about a year or so ago, so the committee agreed that it would be appropriate to change the name to Beulah Payne Memorial Park. And council will be taking action to execute that recommendation shortly, as soon as we figure out the appropriate process to do so. Moving into the rest of the agenda, we had a public hearing on a VDOT Smart Scale application. Smart Scale is a statewide funding program established by the General Assembly in cooperation with the Virginia Department of Transportation to take on consideration of major transportation improvement projects that are needed and have significant impacts. The public hearing last night was to consider a proposal from VDOT primarily to address the complicated traffic maneuvers that exist in the intersection of Route 122 and 221 in the northeastern quadrant of town. That's the area where Food Line Shopping Center is, also the Forks Country Restaurant, Shell gas station. VDOT is seeking our support to pursue a smart scale planning application to install a roundabout there. After several studies through the Planning District Commission, presentations from VDOT, we are looking at moving forward with an application to participate in that project. In order to do that, we needed to have a public hearing to obtain input. However, during the public hearing, there were no speakers and the public hearing was closed, and we moved on to the next items on the agenda. The next items primarily concern special events requests, two of which are major events sponsored by the Central Virginia Business Coalition. The first item was establishing a date for Centerfest. As most people who've been around here know, but for the benefit of newcomers, Centerfest is probably the major outdoor festival that occurs within the town of Bedford in the Centertown area, usually on a Saturday in the fall. Gets great attention, great traffic, good opportunity for folks to get together and convene and be entertained and maybe even conduct a little business. The date for this year's Centerfest event was proposed for Saturday, September 21st. Council unanimously approved that date and the street closings necessary to make that happen. The other event proposed by the Central Virginia Business Coalition is our annual Christmas parade, which is proposed for the first Saturday in December every year. Again, great event that kind of is part of a lot of things that go on in town to kick off commemorations of the holiday season. The proposed date by the Central Virginia Business Coalition is December 7th, 2024. That was also unanimously approved last night by Town Council. And in the item mentioned previously by Councilman Johansson, Bedford Get Together wishes to have a formal event on Sunday, August 18th from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock to dedicate the mural and kind of formally recognize the contributions of the artists and Bedford Get Together's contribution to the community. That also was approved along with street closures on South Bridge Street and possible closures on Main Street adjacent to Centertown Plaza. Going back, just for information, Centerfest is typically an all-day event. So on Saturday, September the 21st, I believe, yes, There will be setup taking place early in the morning at 6 a.m., and that event will go on until 7 p.m. On December 7th, the Christmas parade will take place from 11 o'clock a.m. until 1 o'clock p.m. So if you want to go ahead and circle those on your calendar, be prepared. We will look forward to seeing you at those events. The next item of discussion related to the roundabout application proposal. And again, the background on that is really going back to 2020. The town has worked with the Central Virginia Planning District Commission and the local residency of the Virginia Department of Transportation to talk about traffic concerns at that intersection near the Forks restaurant. Probably the biggest contributor to traffic there historically has been when schools are in session, and in the mornings when people are heading out to Liberty Middle School and Liberty High School, and in the afternoons when those schools are released, there's a lot of pressure on those particular roads at that particular intersection. And if you've traveled through there during school days, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But also there's a continued increase in traffic in general, and that relates to the development activity in the community. VDOT's noted that the traffic continues to increase. We have more people coming into town, which, we view as a very good thing, and we welcome that. But we do need to make sure that our infrastructure can handle those things. And without some intervention, VDOT noted that the level of service that is provided by the intersection will deteriorate. One option that was considered was simply adding a right turn lane from 221 as you come from town on Longwood Avenue, turning right onto Independence Boulevard. But in the analysis provided by the consultants, both from VDOT and the Planning District, it was noted that that was really a short-term fix that would not greatly improve the situation overall. So as much as a roundabout is probably a new and maybe unusual thing for a lot of us to get our heads around, VDOT has been very active elsewhere in Virginia in implementing these things and sees them as something that preserves the functionality of intersections in an efficient way. Basically, their projection was that installation of a roundabout would essentially resolve traffic issues for approximately the next 20 years, and ideally longer beyond that. So the process is for us to consider pursuing this through this Smart Scale funding program. Largely the funds for that would be provided by the state, but it's also a very competitive process. So where we are now is submitting an application for this grant program. Once our application is in, it will be weighted and evaluated against proposals from all across the state. So we talked about this a little bit last night. For folks who might be a little concerned about the speed at which this project is happening or might happen, it's still fairly conceptual at this point. The action that was considered last night was simply to apply for the grant. Council did unanimously approve making this grant application. The next step would be for that to be submitted in this competitive pool of applications from throughout the Commonwealth. If it is identified as a project that could be funded, council would then, in my understanding, have to take action to accept the grant. If that were to happen, then this project would be entered into VDOT's 6-year capital improvement program. So, still not quite there yet. We are looking at the possibility of a roundabout at that intersection, and we're initiating that process, but there are still several steps left to take, and one of those at least still includes action by council. As we talked last night, in a probably quickest time frame example, if this made it through all those processes, the earliest we would likely see this implemented would be approximately 2031. Again, council did unanimously approve submitting an application, and we will see how that goes and certainly keep the public advised and abreast of those future plans and how they might progress. The next item of new business related to accepting a road dedication of On Time Road. This is a road that serves Bison Printing, which is a business located kind of in the northwest quadrant of town. Most people may not be familiar with the physical location, but they're probably familiar with the business, as the Beiser brothers who run that are very active and very successful. They became part of the town as part of the Phase 2 boundary adjustment last year in 2023. And so the road that serves them will now be maintained by the town. Of course, we had to take action to approve that, which council did unanimously last night. But that's also part of a bigger picture out there at the former Willebrator site, where the Town Economic Development Authority has taken ownership of that to create a really active and really exciting economic development opportunity related to the steel industry. For those of you who weren't familiar with what Willebrator did, basically there is a foundry on site. And one of the things they did was to create things such as brake pad linings and powder coating out of steel. They would take steel shot and kind of work that down into smaller things that could create other things. The EDA, working with local metalworking businesses, which there are several in the Lynchburg area. In fact, we're one of the main active areas for that kind of industry in the country and possibly the world. Also, we've talked to Virginia Tech about some economic development opportunities that they are interested in and some things that they could use that foundry for. We've also been in touch with federal agencies, including the U.S. Navy, who has international interest in that based on its ability to create certain alloys that are useful to them. So EDA Chairman Jonathan Buttram provided information about that specific project about a month and a half ago at council. You can go back and check the agenda and check the recording of that meeting, but it's an exciting opportunity that relates both to that road dedication for Bison and also the dedication of infrastructure, including a lift station out there and some improvements that need to be made in cooperation with the Bedford Regional Water Authority, as well as the current owners of the building, which are Winoa. Town Council unanimously approved that in conjunction with the road dedication as well last night. The final item of new business last night was an addition which we requested, and that is adoption of the street paving schedule for fiscal year 24-25. As part of the annual budget process, staff, in conjunction with the Virginia Department of Transportation, develops a paving schedule of specific streets to be resurfaced and repaired within town each fiscal year. We receive direct funding each year from VDOT to pay for most of that, and we try to schedule it in a strategic way where we address the problems we know about, get ahead of problems before they happen, and do that on an ongoing basis that makes sense. Obviously, if we fixed everything at one time, as much as we'd like to, we probably never would practically be able to do so. We would then be setting ourselves up for problems at a specific point in time later. So what we do is we develop a scheduled interval each year for these projects. Given the timing of the adoption of the fiscal year 24-25 budget, as well as the schedule for adding additional streets to the town's network, this list was developed a little bit later than usual. And let me speak to that last point in greater detail as well. When we took in areas adjacent to town last year in 2023, those were also public streets which were maintained by VDOT, but which the town will be taking over. The schedule for that meant that those actually would not come into our system until February, even though we executed the boundary adjustment in July. We took care of all the administrative angles there and have noted that as a result, in addition to taking on these areas in maintenance, VDOT will be providing additional funding to the town of approximately $400,000. So one of the things we talked about last night was, even though we're adopting this townwide paving schedule for the coming fiscal year, which runs July 1st through June 30th, when we receive this additional funding from VDOT in mid-year, we're going to take a look at this list and also look at additional projects that can be undertaken. To prepare for this, we do contract this work out because while our public works staff is excellent and do a good job of taking care of facilities, these road projects are typically of a scale beyond what the town handles, and it is more efficient to contract them out. The town has completed the procurement process and identified a vendor to take care of that. Basically, what we did last night was to provide a list for that vendor to work from. And that was unanimously approved also by council. And for those who are interested, I'm just going to go down the list of streets that are scheduled for improvement beginning immediately through June 30th of next year. That list is Gum Street, Galax Street, Big Island Highway as you come into town from Liberty High School, Pinecrest Avenue, Woodcrest Avenue from Cedar Crest Drive to Pinecrest Avenue, Woodcrest Drive from Pinecrest Avenue to Cedar Crest Drive, Cedar Crest Drive from Woodcrest to the end of the road, North Hills Drive from Oakwood Street till its terminus, Grandview Road from North Hills Drive to Oakwood Street, Vista Circle from North Hills Drive to Vista Circle's loop terminus, Community Drive from Longwood Avenue to Ridgewood Drive, Ridgewood Drive from Community Drive to Wilson Street, Wilson Street from Ridgeview Drive to its terminus, Bellevue Street from Wilson Street to its terminus, Oliver Street from Bellevue Street to its terminus, Maymount Drive from Peak Street to the end of that road, Old Mill Road from Burks Hill Road to Reserview Street, Reserview Street from Old Mill Road to its terminus, Center Street from West Main Street to West Washington Street, Grove Street from the railroad crossing to Jackson Street, and Jackson Street from Grove Street to North Bridge Street. We will also work with our partners, Media Squatch, and our contractors to advise the neighbors along those routes when that specific activity will take place. But for those of you who are listening, be advised if you live along those routes, at some point in the coming year, in the coming 12 months, we will be undertaking paving activity through our contractors. And that concluded the items of business last night that were considered by town council. As always, I appreciate your time and attention to this, and we appreciate your involvement and your input in terms of what happens with your town government. If you ever have a question, I invite you to contact me directly. My email is bwarner@bedfordva.gov, or you can call my desk at 540-587-6022. That rings to me directly. If there's service you need or something we need to be aware of, please let us know. If you are experiencing an issue, we do encourage you to report that, because as much as we try to get eyes and ears out into the community, sometimes there may be things we don't know about. And oftentimes, if you're experiencing a service issue, you're not the only one. So we appreciate the input we get at all times, and thank you for your patience and support of my colleagues in delivering what we hope is excellent service. In closing, I kind of want to follow up on a personal level, largely, in terms of the comments that Vice Mayor Stanley offered about Tom Padgett. I know Tom personally and the family. I've known him since I moved here, interacted with Beverly and their son Drew and their daughter Teresa frequently, and I will just tell you they're just wonderful folks. We live together, we work together, we've worshiped together. And the insight I'm going to provide is that I'm not a native of Bedford myself. I moved here back in 2000 and have been grateful to be here ever since. And I've known Tom Padgett most of that time, but from the first point that I knew Tom, it felt like I knew him my whole life, because he's just such a gracious, pleasant, and wonderful human being. And then, of course, Tom answered the call and ran for town council and served for many years with distinction. But, my experience with Tom personally is what I hope a lot of people have with our community. I'm going to wait for the train to pass just for a second here. Bedford is a community that is beautiful in its physical setting and characteristics. There are a lot of wonderful activities and things that are available here that aren't anywhere else. But really the difference is, and what makes it uniquely special ultimately, is the people who live here. And my observation is that the natives here, who we all ought to pause, those of us who moved here, and recognize that this is a community that's been here since 1782. So there are a lot of people who came before us who built this wonderful place that attracted us to want to be here. But they don't keep that to themselves, and it's not an exclusive thing by a long stretch. My experience and that of my family is these folks who are natives, who ought to be proud of what they've created and accomplished, are happy to share that and are very generous in that. And I mention that in light of the news about Tom, because certainly that was my experience with him. And in addition to the difficult situation that he and his family are facing right now, I felt that it was a good example of what makes us truly the best little town. I will close by asking your prayers and good thoughts for Tom, for his wife Beverly, son Drew, and his daughter Teresa, in a very difficult situation. I'm sure we will be hearing news about that shortly, but whatever transpires, I'm thankful for the relationship I have with those wonderful folks and so many other great neighbors here in the town. And I do look forward to joining you next time on this podcast.